Thank you guys so much. I was hoping if to be able to make it more interactive, but doing by Zoom, it may be more of me talking and less getting to share with everyone. But let me get started. See if I can share my screen with you. And I think you should see my screen now, correct? And Cynthia, you're the only one I can see. So if you want to help me, if you see faces or want to watch a chat or help me out, I would love it because for some reason your face is the only one that I can see.
I'm absolutely happy to help you, for sure.
Okay. So I wanted to start this evening by talking about our social emotional framework that we adopted in the last couple of years in Northwest ISD. And really, we tried to keep it as simple as possible. We had high school students help us design this graphic or this framework. And tonight, I'm really only going to focus on one. There's 6 competencies, social emotional competencies that we focus on. But again, I want to focus on just one petal, or what we call responsible decision making. I won't give you too many technical definitions at all tonight, but when we talk about responsible decision making, it's really the ability to make constructive choices about behavior, social interactions based on ethical standards, safety concerns, and social norms. And so when I think about how our kids learn to make responsible decisions, you know, we think about whose responsibility is it to teach them. And if you notice in the center of our graphic, it was purposeful that we think it takes all of us. You notice at the bottom, it's up to me, it's up to you, it's up to all of us, but the family, the school, the community. And so that may mean home, school, church, other organizations, ball clubs. There's a variety of ways that our students are going to learn to make responsible decisions. So I don't know if you're willing to tell me, but I took employees through this same type of lesson this past year. And as I asked them, I'm like, who or what influenced or influences your decision making? And with that said, you know, I had to reflect as I began to teach a lesson on like this, who was most influential in my life, probably in my decision making. And I had to think it was my mom. So as a parent, you know, you have a lot of influence. And I'm not sure, Cynthia, tell me, because again, I can't see the chat. If anybody's willing to just type, I know they may be on phones. If not, they're willing to just tell us who is, maybe it might be a grandparent, a coach, a church person. If you reflect on who was a strong influence in your decision-making abilities.
So I have a parents, church, dance teacher, someone said, yeah. I can see the chat and I'll let you know when people post something. So yeah, that's
Okay.
a variety though. Parents, church, dance teacher.
Yeah, so I mean, it can be school person, it can be in the home, it can be outside of the home, but adults are going to influence the decisions that our kids make. And so I laugh, but I don't laugh. But, you know, one of the terms we hear nowadays is lawnmower parenting. And this cartoon says, I've decided it's not the helicopter parents I have to worry about, but rather the lawnmower parents. Yes, she says, the ones who have to mow down all the obstacles for their children. And, you know, as I think about lawnmower parenting, the only thing that I struggle with lawnmower parenting is that we rob our kids of the ability to make their own decisions, to identify their own problems, solve their own problems. And so this is one extreme, and I don't know that we have lawnmower parents on here, but it's one extreme that we see kids may not be making their own decisions because adults are making decisions for them. And so parents remove obstacles for their kids in hope of setting them up to be successful. But at the same time, we want them to learn to make decisions that are not where the stakes are not so high yet necessarily.
Mhm.
So again, if I was able to present this in person or to see all of you, I'm curious about, and even in the chat, was your parent a lawnmower parent? And perhaps, do you think you struggle with lawnmower parenting? Or I'll even hear voices if we can talk about
Yeah, we had a brave person for sure say they're guilty. And I think, Jamie, what I immediately came to mind is, our intent is pure. Right? As a parent, we really want our kids, with like, oh, as long as they're happy or what, like we want them to enjoy their experiences, and we know. I feel that's some of why we sometimes just try to either make things easy or whatnot, not with the intent of taking away the obstacles. So,
yeah, I can read the chat. It came up, so I see what people are saying.
oh, good.
So my parents were not lawnmowers. Yeah, me either. Yes, and some people, it's just, Tracy, I'm reading what Tracy wrote too. I hear many parents say,
Mhm.
because we all want the best for our kids.
Yeah.
Yes, hating to watch them struggle. So, and it becomes a point where you watch them struggle safely or making, accepting consequences for decisions that may not be so high stakes. So when we talk about, there we go. And helping an adult or helping a child avoid all natural consequences, it isn't really good for that. It's hard. It's hard to watch loved ones, whether it be a parent, a sibling, a child, anybody that you know and love. But I tell counselors, I've used this before, some people create their own storm and get mad when it rains, that there's consequences for some decisions. And sometimes kids learn, and adults, you may learn from your consequences. But if we are, I guess, not only overcompensating for children, but maybe even other adults in trying to save them from their own decisions, that may not be what's best in teaching them responsible decision making. I want to go from, I'm really going to go from one extreme to the other to tell you how influential you are. Perhaps your childhood may have been in your parenting, or even now experiences that your child may be around. So when I say that, I'm trying to manage and still look at everything too. It's just juggling. When we talk about, and I don't know if any of you are familiar with this landmark study on adverse childhood experiences, but this was a study that was done from 1995 to 97, where 17,000 people were given this survey about their childhood experiences that also measured their current health status and behaviors. And we do know that childhood experiences, kids that are around abuse, whether that be physical, emotional, sexual, kids that have experienced emotional or physical neglect, and a household dysfunction, whether you've got mental illness, incarceration in your family, extended family, violence, substance abuse, alcohol, drugs, divorce. So these are all experiences too that are going to impact decision making. So one thing, if you can for a moment, I can click out, I put, I'm gonna put this in the chat really quick, hang on. I'm gonna have to pop out. Give me just a second.
Sure, Dr. Farber, if there's anything I can help with, let me know. And as you work on that, my understanding of all the research done with adverse childhood events is really being powerfully used in just across every field. So if anyone has definitely had experience with either training on it or, we'd love to hear your thoughts on that too.
We'll talk about, I like what Angela shared, and yes, that simply because I struggled in my childhood, and you think about all, and Angela, you may, if those of you who want to link out to the ACEs survey really quick, let me get back in here. But your perhaps childhood may be influencing how you parent now too. So when I say that types of childhood trauma measured in this study, anywhere from physical abuse, verbal abuse, sexual abuse, physical neglect, emotional neglect. Notice 5 are related to other family members, a parent who's an alcoholic, a mother who's a victim of domestic violence, a family member in jail, a family member diagnosed with a mental illness, and the disappearance of a parent through divorce or abandonment. As you talk about each type of trauma that a kid perhaps, or even you as a parent may have experienced, each one of those types of trauma counts as one ACE. And so when we go on to talk about the ACEs, and this is something I've taken our counselors through, I've taken our assistant principals through, because I really don't believe that there are any, even extended families that may not have had situations that you have dealt with. And so with that, possible outcomes of adverse childhood experiences, notice a lot of it relates to decision making later on, perhaps inactivity, smoking, alcoholism, drugs, missed work, missed school, depression, suicide. So it's adults around our children too, is what I'm trying to say, that may influence our children's decision making. So we have one extreme of parents that may be mowing everything over for their kids, not allowing them to experience anything negative. And we may have parents on another, it's an extreme opposite, where, kids are experiencing very traumatic, and the more ACEs that they have, they may be struggling with making poor decisions as well. So with that, so this is considering a group of 30 children. You think about how many kids, 6, as Tracy said, thankfully her ACE score is 0. So if you have even a group of 30 kids, you could have three kids in that 6 or more ACEs. And again, those trauma experiences are going to influence decision making. So when I talk about, and I'm going to get more over, not necessarily this, but how we can build responsible decision making, and also a book It's a brand new book out that's talking about how do you build the resiliency in your kids as well. So naturally, if you're around your own kids or other kids, but children with more adverse childhood experiences, I mean, we obviously see more academic struggles, more attendance problems, more behavior, suspension, and it's oftentimes directly reflected by adults' decisions around them. So when I say, what types of decisions do adults make in their lives? And, I ask everything that and I talk constantly to counselors across the district, that we have very conservative parents to very liberal parents. And, there's all kinds of decision making going on. And with that, this is just some of the list of decisions that you make that you may or may not involve your children in, and they understand the reason for your decisions. And because, again, you are going to be your actions and I don't know how to better state it, but you have such a large influence on them. And so the decisions that you make and communicating with your kids about why you as a family or you as a parent make these decisions in so many different areas is absolutely crucial, that you communicate with them even about your decisions. I say that, I went on to say this already, but we lead by example. The path our children choose will play a big role in determining the direction that their life takes. So whether it's you as a parent that's going to influence them, a coach, someone said a dance teacher, a church, there are adults, and adults around them are going to influence their decisions and whether they become good decision makers. I'm going to show this video. Cynthia, let me know, and we'll recap some of the strategies that she suggests, but let me know. I hope you can hear it. So,
You bet.
Every child will face innumerable decisions throughout their lives. Will they make constructive choices that will help them build a successful life? That will depend on their ability to analyze situations, understand ethical implications, and evaluate consequences. Their decisions will affect their own well-being and that of others.
oh no, sorry. I clicked off of it. I'm so sorry. I will not do that again. Can't click around.
Every child will face innumerable decisions throughout their lives. Will they make constructive choices that will help them build a successful life? That will depend on their ability to analyze situations, understand ethical implications, and evaluate consequences. Their decisions will affect their own well-being and that of others.
I think for responsible decision making, what we're really talking about here is teaching kids to think through all the parts of a problem and really understand it in a deeper way, so that they're not making impulsive decisions, that they're thinking about, if I make this decision, what are the consequences of that decision? So we're actually trying to think through a few steps ahead. How will other people react to my decision to do X? That's actually involving your social awareness and your relationship skills as you're thinking through your responsible decision making.
When you're thinking about responsible decision making, we have to think too, as adults, how much do we help kids make decisions? We have a lot of kids in college and young adults, anxiety and depression's through the roof, and I think there's a lot of kids that turn into adults that aren't sure how to make a decision on their own. So the idea as teachers and parents of supporting our kids in decision making, and also letting them deal with natural consequences of their decisions when we know it's not going to hurt them, of course. And again, it's case by case and it depends on age, but it's really important to think about us as scaffolding them, but we want them to be able to eventually make independent decisions that hopefully are the right ones for them.
Having conversations after they make their choice, why did you choose that? What could you have done differently? Was that the best choice? And really allowing them to construct their understanding or verbalize the way that they made that selection. Sometimes it may be because it was enticing, or because you thought it would be fun, or they thought it would have a certain outcome. And that may really give us some insight on how do we present choices? You know, what choices can we present that in the end really gives us what we're looking for? Because choice allows growth and opportunity.
As we think about discipline or consequences, really having our young people think through what happened, why did I do what I did, how did that make others feel, and then what's appropriate for me to do now, both in terms of having a consequence, but also to repair the damage. So if a young child is in trouble for being disruptive in the classroom, we could just give them a timeout, or we could actually help them understand, why is that actually a problem? What is the teacher's experience like when she's trying to teach a lesson and you keep on being disruptive? How would you feel if you were trying to communicate to a group of 25 kids, but one student kept doing that? And what can we do to let that teacher know that we understand how she must feel and that we're sorry about that? They're much more likely to really reflect on that and not do it again and to apologize appropriately than had they just been sent out or lost recess or just excluded from instruction as a timeout. So it's really important for discipline that we give kids opportunities to analyze the situation, to reflect on the different perspectives, and to repair that damage so that they're more likely to internalize the lessons that can be learned from these conflicts and not simply just repeat it again or just get angry.
So I think interesting that when they talk about teaching our kids that it's important to give the kids the opportunity to, as we said before, analyze situations, reflect, or repair damage. And this again is where, when I ask, are we lawnmower parents, and that we go into action in solving problems for our kids, or do we let them struggle some on their own to repair the damage or to fix the problems that perhaps they've created? And as a parent, you may or may not be an educator as well, and I can tell you our own educators struggle. I mean, our own educators are lawnmower parents, trust me. Counselors, administrators, teachers, no one wants to see their child struggle. And so I definitely think it's a difficult, I'm not saying by any means that it's easy, but in order to send them off to college, or to send them to, off your doorstep, I hope, or off your couch one day, we've got to allow them to make their own decisions and to solve some of their own problems. So with that, I went ahead and wrote down the questions that she said in the video in case you want to use them even as a parent, just and reflect. It's hard sometimes when your kids make stupid decisions or adults make stupid decisions. You want to scream at them, you want to holler at them, or to punish them. Maybe you don't want to discuss it, or maybe you can't discuss it when you're so upset with them at the time, but just thoroughly understanding, why did you make that decision? Let's talk about it. What could you have done differently? Was it the best choice? And what happened? Why did I do what I did? How did it make others feel? What do I do now? Being a former high school counselor, when I wanted to send kids to their parents to talk, they're like, no, they'll just scream at me. They'll just, and so I think it is hard as a parent, to keep conversation to where you can have a discussion, or to really, and trust me, kids are often resistant too, where they don't want to listen. It makes it hard to have a civil discussion with them both ways. So just really working through situations as much as and communicating with them in a calm manner. I'm going to plug.
Well,
Go ahead. Yeah.
Sorry, Jamie, can I say a couple things
Yes.
on that one? Though I love those questions for sure. And I just want to honor the comments too of just one family is saying, you know, they have to take into consideration their child's um, high functioning autism too, and adjusting all this to fit that child. And I would say that's true. You know, you could fit that into any child situation, you know, that might have a circumstance that we need to adjust some of these generalities for sure. So you know, we just need to maybe think a little bit outside of the box when it comes to kiddos that have a special way their brain works or that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I mean, they're students with disabilities. You know, even at school and I'm sure at home, you're putting more safeguards into place or perhaps more accommodations into place, and that may be, you know, another reason that you might want to protect a child more, I guess I should say. But we do take into account, and I'm sure a parent takes into account the level, you know, the age of the child, the everything, you know, disabilities, that sort of thing. When you're expecting a child to learn from their mistakes or learn from their responsible decision making, I think you are going to take your individual child into account. So, Cynthia, I do want to plug, because a lot of responsible decision making is, and we do offer Love and Logic in the district. You may have to, I'm not sure that it's an open time to sign up for Love and Logic, but a lot of Love and Logic is about letting our kids deal with natural consequences of their decision when we know it's not going to hurt them. You know, we may struggle to watch them. It may be hard to watch them struggle now, but when we talk about, you know, not being able to manage their money now, it will become even more severe, not having self-control when they're young. The stakes get higher. The older they get, perhaps the stakes get higher. And so watching, you know, safely struggle, and that's difficult as a parent. You know, Cynthia and I were talking before you got on, that a lot of times we don't necessarily, especially the older your kids get, you may not talk to other parents about, well, what's a safe struggle and what's normal for a teenager or an adolescent, and that is difficult as a parent knowing. So where to intervene, when to solve the problem for them, or when to let them get themselves out of that struggle. Cynthia, do you have anything to add? You're nodding your head, but I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
That's my my participation style. I'm very affirming to let you know I'm listening. You know, I just would say that when you think of the consequences and the things, helping to make decisions, knowing what they can handle, like my thought is whatever they, you know, that they can do, you know, let them do that with safety always in mind. And that builds up their competence and it builds up their confidence. And so daily tasks. So when they're old enough to make their lunch, right, for school, you might need to check it so it's not filled with ding dongs and just applesauce, you know, that it's a little balanced, but let them do those tasks. And then they might, you know, have some consequences in that as far as forgetting their lunch or just letting them experience doing things. And then what happens when we might make a mistake. Those questions are awesome. And I think that you put up, and I hope some, you know, we'll make sure we get those. I'll put that on the website also for parents to refer to. But I think when we help a child walk through those things when we're not angry is super powerful. And then also role model that. When you as a parent made a decision that just went south, that you sit there and say, you know what, let's talk, what happened? And then, you know, just role model to them using those questions yourself.
So one thing, as we teach responsible decision making, you know, like we've said, more likely to learn lessons and not repeat the same actions. And on the next slide, I'm going to share with you a book that we're learning that developing character is more and more instrumental in the outcome of your children one day than perhaps what they originally thought. And so I know there's a lot of words on this slide, but where it says between those who struggle, you know, why is it that some kids struggle and others shine? And this book, by the way, by Michelle Borba, I'm going to plug. I haven't read it, just FYI. It is hot off the press this month, 2021. And it talks about, yeah, the surprising reasons why some kids struggle and others shine. But it says it comes down not to grades or test scores, but to 7 character traits. And I bold-face those character traits. But I mean, I don't know how to tell you how instrumental you are still as a parent in teaching them confidence, empathy, self-control. Self-control relates to responsible decision-making, integrity, curiosity, perseverance, and optimism. And she goes on to say, the review goes on to say the traits can be taught to children at any age. I have had the chance to skim this book. I will be reading this book soon. And so she offers, you know, practical ways for you to develop these traits in your kids. And so as much, you know, I realize their GPA is important. I realize grades are important. You know, obviously at school, we are trying to educate them in, you know, reading, writing, but there's so much developing their character and their decision-making abilities. I cannot stress enough to you. So I wanted to share this book that's hot off the press with you in case you are interested in it.
And I just found it on Audible too, for those of us who do better at listening to the books while we're commuting around. So it is already on Audible.
Yes, so she's done a lot of research. She's a renowned psychologist. And so I do think it's interesting that we've gotten away from developing, and I'm not saying, you know, so many people developing character in our kids or these social emotional competencies, but it is what makes kids thrive and what makes them successful adults one day. It's not always the popular thing. And one thing I saw in the chat earlier, you know, it's what other parents may be doing for their kids too. And you don't want to not do the same, but developing that character now, I think will pay dividends for you later. So I really just want you to think about, and I will stay on and answer questions and that sort of thing as well. But what is or will be your children's story? And I also said during our conversation or our talk tonight, your story matters. You know, the adverse childhood experiences that you experience. And as a high school counselor, I always told kids, I can promise you, you did the same thing. You took from your parents what you wanted to repeat, and the things you didn't want to repeat, you're like, I'm my own parent. I don't have to repeat what my parents did. And so your children will do this. But as I tell you, your story influences their story. Your decision-making influences their decision-making. And so when I ask you, you know, how will your decision-making influence theirs, and then how will their decision-making influence their stories? And so it's a lot to think about and a lot to process in allowing them to work on their problems, allowing them to solve problems, allowing them to analyze problems. But it's really, and I know there may be times they're like, please just make this decision for me. That was me. my mom didn't want to make decisions for me, even in high school. And I begged her to just please tell me what to do. And there's times that we need to allow them to figure it out and not tell them what to do and allow them to struggle with some of those decisions. So that is the conclusion of my, I don't know what time it is. Oh, it looks like it's about almost 7:40, but I would love to stay on and talk or answer questions or any advice I can give, that kind of thing.
Yeah, anything someone would share, you can definitely unmute yourself of helping us empower our kiddos' decisions. That would be wonderful. Love to hear it.
Hey, this is Monica Walker. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to say thank you. I appreciate the content. I thought it was well presented. I just think it helps me reflect on my own story and, how it will impact how I parent my children, and then how their current situations could be watch outs for the future, and how we can talk through those things. So I just wanted to say thanks and appreciate the meeting tonight.
Thank you.
Dr. Farber, do you have any suggestions? I think on helping our kids not be afraid to make the decisions because they're going to make a mistake. What do you tell kids that have that thought or lean towards that perfectionism side where they're like, okay, I'm just going to avoid it because then I won't make a mistake if I never have to make that decision?
Well, and to be honest, some of your kids who lean towards perfectionism or they don't want to fail or make mistakes, those are, they're ones that you have to really walk through the decision making. And it's very anguishing, I guess. I think I was maybe one of those kids that I'm glad my parent didn't make those decisions, but I was one of those kids that you're describing, and I'm just it was anguishing to, do those things on my own. But looking back, I am so grateful. And I may need to get back to your original question, Cynthia, though, is like, how do you do it? Is what you were asking, right? Because turning the questions back to a child that is afraid to make a mistake and to help them analyze it, so let's look at it. What are the pros of this decision if you do it or if you choose this? What are the cons? What, continuing. And as a counselor, we do that. Kids oftentimes want you to tell them what to do. And even if you're an adult going to counseling or a kid going to counseling, it's often not that we're not going to tell you we'll help you analyze the situation. We'll help look at the situation from different angles and different perspectives. But the last thing we want to do is to make the decision for you. And so I think if that answers it better, Cynthia, is to continue to turn it back and to help them walk through it, help them analyze it. But in the end, the decision is yours. And that's difficult to do at times. It's sometimes easier just to tell them what to do or what you think they should do.
Yeah, and I think it's also important for them to know just because you make a decision doesn't mean there's always a finality, or, like if it doesn't quite go with the result that you thought it would have, let's make a different decision, that there's going to be a plan B or walk through what's the worst that can happen is a lot of times what I'll ask a student, right? Or my children, what's the worst that can happen, right? And that's also a good reflective. And I appreciate that Monica brought up that whole thought of reflecting. So much of this is just talking it through with someone and, experience and learning, and they slowly build these skills.
Yes.
Well, we have come to the end of our time. And so thank you everyone for, oh, yep. I hear someone is, did someone else have something to say? Okay, I thought I heard someone with a question. Well, thanks again, everyone, for joining us tonight. And we appreciate that your time and your efforts in being here. Know that we are, as a district in the education program, we're making efforts to have a consistent topic each week. And we foresee doing that even next school year. So you're welcome also to put in the chat room some topics that you would like us to bring to the discussion. That would be fabulous. So again, I'm Cynthia Elliott. My email is just my last name, ELRC, my first initial, and then ELLIOTT @NIST.org. And I'd love any feedback from you or any you might have. So Dr. Farber, again, thank you for tonight and making us think and empowering us as parents.
Thanks, Cynthia.
Sure. Good night, everybody.